All right, well, if the volume is a little low, we're going to turn it up. And I'll try to talk loud for now. But welcome to the third annual Great Lakes Business Intelligence and Big Data Summit. I am your host. My name is Scott Smith. I work for WIT. And what is WIT? We are a business intelligence and analytics consulting firm in Troy, so just literally right down the street. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. We've got a great list of speakers and sponsors, and very excited to have you out. So I've got a couple slides that I'm going to go through just to kind of set the stage for today. So my first real slide is some business intelligence action for you guys. This is our third year, and as you can see from this chart, it's grown considerably over the 3-year period. And my little red line there was at the 300 mark, which is what we were supposed to be at today from a maximum capacity perspective, but we have 325. So some of the sessions could be a little tight in terms of standing room only, so make sure if you really want to get to a session, make sure that you get there early and get a great seat. From a total actual population analysis of the group here today, 325 attendees across 80 companies, and then we have 8 partners and sponsors here that want to talk to you. Okay, so from a housekeeping perspective, we've got 2 keynotes today. So one in the morning and one closing the session. And basically the format and structure of how this is going to work is 3 tracks. So track 1 and track 2 are basically company and industry case studies, and they will take place in this room. What we're going to do after the first keynote session is run a slider down the middle and divide the room into 2 sections. And so section 1 and section 2 will be here, and section 3, where our sponsors and partners will be hanging out, will be around the corner outside in the hallway. So please visit your sponsors. There will be door prizes, and I'll cover those in the next slide. So if you hang out to the bitter end today, there's lots of great stuff to win. What's for lunch? Where's lunch? The lunchroom is also in that direction, and it fits about 240, 250 people. So we also have some overflow further down the corner. So if there's not a seat in the big room, please continue walking, and there will be a seat for you in one of the next rooms. Wi-Fi, we do have Wi-Fi today. So banquets is the identifier for that, and there's no password, so feel free to log on to the Wi-Fi. Cell phones, please silence them and show respect for the other attendees. If you need help, basically our entire staff, our entire consulting group from WIT is here today. We're all wearing the blue shirts, so feel free to grab any one of us, and we'll be happy to help you out. I see a few folks have coats hanging from your chairs. There's a coat closet right outside at the end of the hallway here if you want to hang up your coat. And from a housekeeping perspective, that's it. So door prizes, there's a bunch of stuff going on. So one of the things that we want to do for next year, for our 4th annual summit, is we'd like to get some video feedback. Last year we had about a half dozen folks provide us with some feedback that we took and made you a star on the internet. So we're doing that again this year, and if anybody that does a video, just a little 30-second blurb of what they thought of the sessions, we're going to give a Starbucks gift card. We have a feedback raffle at the end of the day, so there's a form in everybody's bag, and if you could just tell us what you thought, great or not so great. We love critical feedback as well as positive feedback. We want to make this a great event for the coming years. We'll be doing a drawing at the end for that, and that's an Amazon gift card. Anybody that tweets, we're going to put your name in a fishbowl and do a raffle for that as well. And of course, our sponsors are also going to do their own individual raffles, and basically the idea is go visit the sponsor, give them the card, or give them a piece of information, they'll drop it in the fishbowl, and we will do drawings at the end of the day today. Okay, any questions before I introduce our first keynote speaker? All right, excellent. So Boris Evelson from the Forrester Group is going to be talking about his topic, and we're very excited to have Boris.
this point, we typically get the theme from Jaws, you know. Ta-da, ta-da. While Scott is setting up, good morning everyone. Let me just see who and what I'm dealing with here today. So anybody who's a novice to business intelligence, raise your hands please. Got a couple of people, all right. 5 years of experience. Got a few, maybe 1/10 of a room. How about like this? Is this better? Better? No? How's it on? Ah, turning it on. I'm not a hardware guy. So 5 years experience, yeah, but maybe 10-year experience. Okay, 25 plus. Got a few, wow, got a few veterans. It's not accessible. People, let's pick on the vendors who are here to blow. Very nice, click. Okay, so I prepared 2 presentations, right? And today, obviously, I'm going to have to use this one because you all failed the first test. #1 BI tool in every single one of your organizations is Excel. Right? No matter what you tell me. Right? This is the first time we meet, but I will bet my 30-year career, my entire 401k plan, that even if you tell me that Excel is not #1 BI tool, if we do a little bit of exploration of what's really being used in your organization, that's exactly going to be the truth. So that's the de facto kind of state of the affairs in the industry. A little bit about Forrester. You know, how many of you have worked with Forrester before? Okay, a few, but not everyone. So, you know, this is kind of our elevator pitch. We help business leaders, blah, blah, blah. But obviously, at the end of the day, we're researchers, we're analysts. We look at the market trends. We analyze those trends. You know, this is kind of my personal journey in business intelligence, about 30 years. Kind of the evolution. About 8 years ago, I left the industry. I left the Wall Street. Was a little bit tired of all the backstabbing, so just decided to sit back and relax and write about this as opposed to delivering something. Boy, was I wrong? Did I pick the wrong industry? I don't know if you know what analysts do, but this is kind of a typical day in the life of an analyst. We need to produce about 3 10-page reports, syndicated reports, once a quarter, and each report is not just something that we think about. It's got to have a survey. It's got to have client interviews to back up the facts. It's got to have vendor evaluations. A little bit about that. We do about 130-minute client interviews per quarter, right? So in this hat, there's about 1,000, to a couple of thousand interactions that I do with clients all the time. There's about 21 one-hour vendor briefings that we conduct to understand the market. Last but not least, we do about 10 advisory days, and similar speeches to this one. So it's a very, very busy time. I absolutely cannot sit on my laurels. I do a lot of very interesting vendor evaluations. I'm sure you've seen some of them. One of the evaluations that I do every year, it has about 700 criteria, and vendors in the room, specifically information builders, click and Tableau, know what they need to go through once a year to evaluate their products, run their products through this very complex evaluation criteria. The latest one, by the way, is going to hit our website tomorrow, the 2015 refresh, so welcome you to take a look at it. I also run what I call an agile DIY, where I look at what does it take to empower business users to be self-sufficient. That's got about a couple of hundred criteria. And last but not least, I also evaluate top business intelligence service providers, similar to your sponsor and your host, WIT. So what does it take for a BI service provider to be a market leader? So as you can see, I'm pretty busy in this market. But as one of my favorite characters, Fred Flintstone, said once, as he was presenting his candidacy to become a grand guru of his lodge, enough me talking about me. Let's have you talk about me. Well, obviously, I'm just joking. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's talk about what we are really gathered to talk about here. And we're gathered here to talk about how to make some money. Right? Business intelligence is absolutely no longer a back office process. It's no longer just about compliance or risk management or counting widgets. It's something that companies use to compete and win in this highly commoditized economy. So as you can see from our latest research, we have some great double-digit returns on business intelligence. What's even more interesting is a correlation that we find every year, inevitably we find this every year, that those companies that invest more in BI, on average about 38% more investment in BI, happen to be companies that grow faster than their peers, right? And we typically segregate the market, and are you growing faster than 15% year over year or slower? And those top performers, faster growing companies, typically do indeed invest more in BI, right? So BI is absolutely front and center of our corporate agendas. We use it to compete on information. We use it not just to compete, actually to survive these days. So that's kind of the bright side of the picture. Now let's kind of come down from the cloud to the reality, and I'm sure this is something that all of you experience every day. Business intelligence is anything but simple. It's never plug and play, and I'm sure somewhere in your organization this old truck of BI that's falling apart has a place in your organization. You know, at the end of the day, business intelligence is all about asking a question and getting an answer. Right? Now, why is it so difficult to ask a question and get an answer? Right? It's really very frustrating. So let's take a look at that. How many people think that the answer to this question is not for? Raising hands. Oh, you're doubting me. You're doubting me. The only correct answer to that question is that it depends. Right? In a stock market, obviously the example is obvious. Right? If the stock price yesterday was 2 and today it rose by 2, the answer to what the stock price is depends on whether you're buying or selling. Right? In a single version of the truth that we all aim to achieve is absolutely not an absolute concept. It's relative. It's contextual. It depends on who is asking that question, and it depends how much you're willing to pay to get an answer. All right, so that's the only correct answer to that question. That's one of the difficulties. Another difficulty comes from the fact that we interpret things in a different way. This is a typical situation between me and my wife, who I love very dearly. I've got a great wife, but we're like, from Venus and from Mars, we miscommunicate completely. So the other day, she asked me, Boris, please go to a store and pick up a carton of milk, and if they have eggs, get a dozen. So what is she expecting me to bring? She's expecting me to bring a dozen eggs, but I, being a computer person, am interpreting it, well, if they have eggs, get a dozen cartons of milk. Right? Both answers are absolutely correct. It depends on how you interpret the question. Right? So now let's look at the other side of the picture. Let's assume that Boris Evelson is not a computer expert. Let's assume that I know very little about computers, and the only thing that I really know about computers is how to use a browser. Right? So a couple of months ago, I needed to go to Cincinnati to deliver a similar speech. So I need to know what to pack. Right? What do I need to pack is my business question. Right? And then seemingly there should be a simple answer. So I go to Google, right? People tell me, you go to Google, almighty Google, it knows everything. So basically you type in your question and you'll get an answer. So I type in my question. I am going to Cincinnati, what do I need to pack? Right, that's my condition, that's my business question. Look what Google answers with. Right, it provides a quote from Mark Twain. It provides some kind of article about Cincinnati Reds and things to do in Cincinnati. Right, I don't want to do anything in Cincinnati. I'm delivering a keynote in Cincinnati. I just need to know what to pack. And then my friends and colleagues tell me, you know what, Boris, better go to weatherchannel.com. Right? So all of a sudden we're now experiencing already a big gap in a lot of business intelligence implementations, is that BI typically helps us analyze a pattern, but it doesn't help us with finding things, right? So there was nothing in Google on the previous screen that told me, okay, this is the wrong application, go to Weather Channel. I had to ask my colleague, right? So finding things in the right place, finding the right application for your use case is a huge gap in typical BI implementation. So I go to weatherchannel.com and look what's happening. I didn't even hit a single button, but it's already telling me weather in Orlando, Washington, and Boston. Completely out of context. I will talk about that. Your typical BI applications that do not carry context are not as valuable as the ones that do. So I get extremely frustrated. I say, all right, weatherchannel.com really doesn't understand who I am and what is it that I need to do. And then my friend tells me, well, Boris, go back to Google, but you need to know how to ask the question from Google, right? Don't type a full sentence, just type a couple of keywords. Now all of a sudden, in addition to me not knowing which application to use, right, and somebody telling me which application to use, I also need to learn the syntax, right? So what happened to this intuitive, user-friendly applications that require zero training? All of a sudden, I need to know where to go, where to look for things, and I need to know how to use it, right? So all of a sudden, we're back into training, etc., etc. So I type in Cincinnati weather, I get Cincinnati weather, I'm getting closer, but it's still not answering my business question, right? Remember, my business question was what to pack. So I get extremely frustrated. I just type, do I need an umbrella.com? Right? There's indeed a website like that, right? Do I need an umbrella.com? It asks me to put in a city. I put in Cincinnati. Yes, it tells me. Absolutely, you need to pack an umbrella. Right? So that's an ultimate BI application. I asked a question and I got an answer. Required zero training. Right? Obviously, things are not that simple. Obviously, I'm not advocating that for every single business question we create a separate application, but I think this goes to show how complex business intelligence environments are. Right? Business people think in terms of, I have a question, I want to get an answer. We think in terms of, oh, in order to get an answer to that question, you need to go to that application. You need to know how to point and click. You need to know how to drag and drop. You need to know what's a fact, what's a dimension, what's a hierarchy, what's an attribute. Right? Business people don't want to do that. So as a reality, remember the theme to that movie, so kind of hum it as I walk you through the next few slides. That's really the reality of BI today, right? We have enterprise BI today. We have lots of good and bad and the ugly, the good, the bad, and the ugly in there. It doesn't really matter what we call this thing. I've been around, as I said, for about 30 years, but the names have changed, but what's under the covers really hasn't changed. And what's under the covers is that most of you in the room today only use a fraction of your enterprise data for information, right? That's the ugly part. In 30 years, right, we will only scratch the surface, right? 30% of data being transformed into information in 30 years. That's about 1% of our enterprise data per year, right? That's not a lot to say. And these are self-reported numbers. Right? Whenever we go in and we dig deeper, the numbers are actually much, much lower. Probably most of you in the room are somewhere in that bottom category, where when we look deep, we see that for majority of our clients, it's somewhere between 15 and 20% of their enterprise transactional data that's being used for information. Right? I'm not even talking about some exotic cloud-based social media, Internet of Things. This is your good old motherhood and apple pie ERP and CRM data that's being used for information. This is another one kind of confirming my statement about Excel. 63% of you in the room use more than 50% of your, keep more than 50% of your BI content in spreadsheets, and about a quarter of you keep about 2/3 or as much as 3/4 of enterprise content in spreadsheets. So some of the reasons that you tell us for that kind of good and bad and ugly situation is that your enterprise environments do not have all of the data that you're looking for, right? We already established just about 15, 20, or 30%. Much more importantly is that data doesn't exist there in the right way, shape, and form. Remember, and we'll talk about that later on, your typical enterprise BI environment is what we call schema on write, which means your data warehouses, your data marts, your operational data stores have very rigid, inflexible schemas, right? And this is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons, even when you have a successfully deployed, seemingly successfully deployed BI tool, people still most of the time use it to export it to Excel, because the SQL in your data warehouse doesn't support all of the use cases that people need to work with, and poor user experience, as I demonstrated by my do I need an umbrella.com example, right? So lots and lots of challenges. So as a result, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly that we're seeing. The enterprise BI, absolutely today, with all of the vendors that you mentioned, all of the vendors that are exhibiting here, they have scalable, robust, mission-critical solutions, but a lot of them, they're complex, they're not really flexible, and they're really, because they're not flexible and require a lot of IT involvement, people go back to Excel. Excel, on the other hand, is agile and flexible and reactive. It does give you that instant gratification, but obviously we know that silos don't really work. They are not scalable. There's a huge operational risk, right? So as a result, we've got this lose, 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 the ugly environment where, we IT people spend most of our time negotiating and working with our business partners, as opposed to spending our time winning, serving, retaining our customers, which is really the key to success that we'll talk about in a couple of slides. So that's kind of the ugly side of the picture. Now let's talk about what do we do about this, right? Let's spend the rest of the presentation talking about the positives. So again, as you could tell already, I'm not really big on the names, right? But I'm a good corporate citizen at Forrester, so I got to use the new name. So the new name for this thing that we're all doing here in this room, we're calling it Systems of Insight, right? So we're all familiar with systems of record, right? Our ERP and CRM record, systems of automation, our data and application integration, our number crunching processes, customer-facing system of engagement applications, and last but not least, what ties it all together with analytics and information are systems of engagement. How do you define systems of engagement? Well, again, there is really no easy way to define it, but when we did think about what is it really different between earlier generation business intelligence environments and systems of engagement, we kind of came up with these two dimensions. The one dimension that I'll spend a lot of time talking about is agile business intelligence. Remember, we want to finally at some point start winning people off Excel, right? And in order to do that, basically our BI environments have to be as agile, as flexible, as responsive as Excel. And the second dimension is really all about the amount and availability of data. Remember, only 30%, 15, 20, 30% today is being transformed, of data is being transformed into information. So what do we need to do about it? Right, that's what big data is all about. Even a better concept is data democratization. We'll talk about that in a second. So think in terms of these dimensions. How do you make your BI environment more agile, more flexible on the one hand, and how do you basically democratize, open up your data and information to more people, faster, better, cheaper? That's the second dimension. So let's examine each one of them at a time, because unfortunately what most of you do these days is treat these two dimensions separately, right? But they're even separately, they're very important, so let's go through them. So agile BI all rests on the fact that Forrester believes that we today have entered what we call the age of a customer. Right? We're kind of already past the information age, right? That's a de facto standard. But what we're seeing today is that most of your corporate investments into software, into hardware, into supply chain, into offshore capabilities have really become commoditized, right? I'm using Dell laptop. I'm sure you're using Lenovo, HP, etc. Different labels, but we know all these laptops are made in exactly the same factory somewhere in the Far East. All right, so how do you really compete on quality of products where everything is commoditized? Cloud has absolutely commoditized and erased all of the differentiation that we think we've acquired with advanced hardware and software. So we really think these days the only difference is how we treat our customers. We call it the pure obsession with winning, attracting, onboarding, retaining, and serving customers. We call it business technology, is what's going to make a difference between a winning business and a losing business. Now, whenever we talk about this age of a customer, an interesting thing has happened over the last few decades. If you look a few decades ago, in a typical Fortune 1000 company kind of a cohort, about a third of companies used to churn, right? And by churn, I mean merger and acquisition, some kind of a breakup, bankruptcy, etc. But about a third of the companies did not exist by the end of any particular decade. In the last decade, from 2003 to 2013, that equation turned upside down. Actually, almost two-thirds of the companies actually disappeared and ceased to exist in their original form. So we kind of asked ourselves, what's the dependency between the age of a customer and this huge churn in the industry? How many of you have been to business school? Yeah, quite a few. So I'm sure you recognize this book. It's not enough to be good as a company. You need to be a great company, kind of a classic business school text. But look at all the companies that classical business school text describes. Look what happened to these companies. Bankrupt, scandal, absorbed, acquired, received federal assistance. As a matter of fact, if you followed the advice in this book and actually invested in those companies, you would have significantly underperformed S&P 500 market. So being great is absolutely not enough these days. Another classical business school text is discipline, right? It's not enough to be good, it's not enough to be great. You have to be focused, you have to be disciplined. Again, look at the companies in this described there. They're definitely not enough. So clearly something different is needed these days to win in this market. And when we dug deeper, we understood that it's really all about agility. Going beyond great, going beyond focus, you really need to be agile and flexible because customers do not wait. Right? I, as a customer with a mobile phone, can switch from one car service to another. I can switch from literally at a click of a button, right? So customer stickiness doesn't really exist anymore. Ubiquitous mobile devices and cloud-based access to all of your competitors' products and services enable customers to change their choices, opinions, preferences, literally with a single click of a button. So we, as businesses, we need to be very, very reactive. Right? In the age of a customer, the word reactive is a good word. It's not a bad word. So when we kind of took that to the next level and we started surveying the market told us, yeah, we kind of sort of intuitively understand what this agility, that business agility is, but it's it's kind of not tangible. How do I touch it? How do I measure it? What is it really factually and objectively all about? So we heard, we listened and we heard, and we conducted some research, and we came up with 10 very tangible, measurable dimensions or attributes of business agility. Right? So now whenever we look at any kind of company, we take them through this kind of a survey, whether it's a one-on-one survey or a broad survey, or kind of examining their kind of publicly available information. These are the kind of dimensions that we see differentiate an agile company, agile business from non-agile. And as you can see, 3 of the dimensions, so about a third just a little bit less than a third of the dimensions are all about BI and analytics, right? And information dissemination and market responsiveness, right? Which is basically what all of us in this room do. So about a third of business agility rests on what you and I do as our professions. And then what we measure for these dimensions is awareness. So if you look at all of the dimensions here, we basically investigate, are you as a company aware that business intelligence or knowledge dissemination or market responsiveness, are you aware that that's an agility attribute? And how well can you execute on that agility dimension, right? So then we plot the companies in these 4 quadrants. If you're in the bottom left, obviously you're clueless about what's going on. If you're aware but can't do anything, you're paralyzed. If you're executing without really having an understanding of strategy, you're dangerous. We obviously all want to be in that upper right quadrant. And guess what? When we plotted, once again, our favorite example, those companies who grow faster than 15% year over year on the right of the slide, and those who grow slower than 15% year over year, and guess what? You know, a lot more higher performing companies are in the formidable category. So we absolutely now have tangible proof that correlates business agility, business flexibility, business ability to react to ever-changing needs of a customer, not just customer regulatory requirements, as I'm sure you all know, especially, let's say, with our new healthcare system that change all the time. I have a humorous example about that. There's one insurance company that told me that they basically gave up using any kind of automated software for claims processing and for actuarial processing because regulations kept changing so fast. They went back to pen and paper. Right? They basically went back to the ultimate flexible technology, pen and paper. So this basically demonstrates that business agility is absolutely key to business survival and business success. So then, what is it? The next question, right? Because as we said, business agility depends on information, agile information management, agile BI, business intelligence professionals. What is it that we can do to support this environment? Well, we have this framework of 4 components that all coalesce into agile BI. Let's walk through 4 of them. It's agile software development methodology and approaches. It's agile organizations, agile BI processes, and agile BI technologies. Let's spend a couple of minutes on each one. The first one I think is probably very familiar to you. This is all about rapid prototyping and proofs of concepts. In the world of BI, requirement gathering only takes you there about, as I said earlier, 15, 20, 30% of the time. If you really want to get there much closer to being 100% on top of things, you've got to be doing lots of prototypes and proofs of concepts. People don't always mean what they say. We witness it all the time. People come to business meetings, steering committee meetings, planning meetings, and they say the right, quote unquote, the right things to put a check off on their, on their individual goals. But then they go back to their offices and they use spreadsheets, right? Because that's what helps them get their work done. And last but not least is that a lot of requirements really materialize only after you deliver something, right? So it's a chicken and the egg syndrome. You've got to deliver something for people to visualize it, and then all sorts of light bulbs start going off in their heads and saying, this is really what I want, this is really what I don't want. So rapid prototypes, rapid proofs of concepts, not using screen mock-ups or whiteboards, but actually using the working software, right? Unlikely, all of the modern BI tools, a lot of the vendors who are presenting here have technology that, on the one hand, can give you desktop or cloud-based tools. Well, literally within a few minutes, a few hours, you can build a working prototype. You can take it through multiple reiterations. And then once you agree on something, it's the same software that you can just pick up and move into your production environment, right? So over the years, last few years, we kind of settled on this 2-week period, right? Just like the story of Goldilocks and Three Bears. You know, more than 2 weeks is too long. Shorter than 2-week period is probably not enough. But you know, make sure that your project plans have very tangible, right? Not just on paper, but tangible deliverables every 2 weeks. Sometimes even 2 weeks is not enough. One of my, it's a humorous example, but it's an actual example. In the country of Brazil, tax code, tax regulation changes every 26 minutes. Every 26 minutes, if you're doing a business with Brazil at a federal, state, county, municipal level, every 26 minutes there's a change to tax regulation. Right? So imagine your software development lifecycle even being 1 day long. By the end of the day, you're a few dozen requirements behind, right? So rapid prototyping is absolute. You know, another great example I just read in the Wall Street Journal that Amazon, I'm sure you read about this too, is planning to use drones to make deliveries. So they submitted a certain drone prototype to a federal, whatever it is, FAA, to approve those drones, and by the time FAA approved them, I think it took FAA a couple of months, those drones were already outdated. So basically FAA approval at this point means nothing, right? Amazon is already working with the next generation of drones. So this rapid prototyping, reiterative cycle is absolutely what's needed. Not to replace, right? Remember, everything that I'm saying here is not to rip and replace your existing processes and approaches, but remember, your existing processes and approaches only get you there 20 to 30% of the way, right? This is what needs to get you there, the other 70 or 80% of the way. The next part of Agile BI is a lot more controversial. This is where I get a lot more pushback, but believe me, there is a direct correlation between companies that embrace this and lots of success. So number one, empowering individual contributors. We'll talk about this later also. That business user self-service, which has a lot of connotations. We'll talk about that later. But business user self-service in BI is absolutely key. You have to create an environment where up to 80% of all BI content is produced by business users themselves. Otherwise, you'll always be playing a catch-up game. You absolutely need to collocate business and BI technologies. That's why I do not believe in offshoring of business intelligence processes. You know, some commodity processes like, maybe regression testing, maybe, maintaining infrastructure, some debugging can be done offshore, but in this agile world, in a world where we need to deliver something every day, at the very least every couple of weeks, you and your business counterparts literally need to be sitting in the same, either physical or virtual environment. If we think about the BI stack, right, I'm sure you all draw the pictures of business intelligence either left to right or top to bottom with your data sources, right, with the ultimate dashboards all the way on the right or on the top. Draw a line there somewhere in the middle, called the first part data preparation. So ETL, building your data warehouses, data models, that's called data preparation. So centralize that as much as possible, put IT in charge of that as much as possible, but everything that's above, right, or to the right of that line, call that data usage, right? That's should be up to 80%, as I said, in the hands of business users. So in large organizations, kind of having the same team that works on data management and data preparation and creating reports and dashboards and metrics doesn't really work well, so you want to separate them, only loosely couple them. Front office and back office analytics are not good friends. They have completely different requirements and tolerances for risk, for accuracy, for latency. That 2 + 2 question to a CFO is indeed 4. Right? Even if it takes that CFO a month-end batch cycle to calculate it, but to a CMO who wakes up in the morning and who reads Wall Street Journal and sees a competitive threat and needs to get out that campaign today, right? So he or she needs to run some customer segmentation analysis today, because tomorrow, even if the result of that customer segmentation is 4, right, to the nth decimal point is going to be irrelevant. So a 3.9 to CMO, but today, when it's much more relevant, right, when the customers are still kind of can be, customer needs can still be addressed, that's much more important. And basically the bottom line here is that you're a business intelligence support organization, right? Your business intelligence competency center, center of excellence, support center, however you want to call it, the structure of that organization cannot be simply centralized, like we sometimes naively think. If we centralize our IT support for other business functions, we can do that successfully for BI. That does not work well for BI. So basically, BI support organizational structure has to mimic your business organizational structure. So if your finance in your global enterprise, if your finance function, head office accounting is centralized, absolutely, that's where your BI team sits. But if your marketing in North America and Asia Pacific are completely different organizations because they sell different products, they segment their customers differently, they run completely different campaigns on different products to different customer segments, and having the same organization for marketing analytics supporting them is just going to create all sorts of overlaps, and people will be stepping on each other's toes, and that's just not going to work. So these are some of the examples of best practices for staffing for agility. Agile BI processes is a multi-day discussion. I'll just call out one of them. And basically it's all about, again, this 80-20 equation where you do want to have up to 80% of the BI content created by business users in their own sandboxes. Right? They not only do they want to create content in sandboxes where they can operate with very few limitations, but they also need to be able to share that content with their colleagues with very little, hopefully even no IT involvement. And then IT role becomes mostly in monitoring what is it that people do in those sandboxes, what is happening in those shared environment, and selectively cherry picking those new processes based on how much things are being used, how many data sources are being accessed, how complex is SQL that Boris Evelson built in his sandbox, how many people are sharing that dashboard that he just put in a shared folder. Based on those parameters, kind of cherry pick and move those things to production. Right? That process of monitoring what business users are doing, we call it BI on BI. I'll have a slide on that later on. And last but not least, obviously everything that I talked about, especially rapid prototyping, especially being flexible and agile, you cannot do if you just have SQL-based relational technologies, right? You really need to have 21st century agile technologies, no SQL, cloud, different types of databases. Self-service is one of my favorite examples. As you recall, when we look at self-service, we decompose self-service by business users. We decompose that seemingly simple statement, seemingly simple requirements into about 50 or 60 different criteria. Can the business user provision his or her own application without picking up the phone and call IT help desk? Can they provision their own data set? Can they create their own sandbox? Is that sandbox in memory, and therefore they're not really limited by SQL type relational operations, right? That's one of the reasons Excel is such a top technology. The other side of the two paths that organizations have taken in the past is big data. Big data is infinitely more complex than the simple multiple V's definition. Basically, the last time we used that multiple V's definition of volume, velocity, variety, etc., several years ago. That definition doesn't really tell the whole picture. We really equate these days big data with data democratization. Right? So the main difference between traditional BI based on SQL, right, which only gets you there, remember, 20–30% of the way, that big data is really just all about more data to more people with better insights, faster, better, cheaper. Right? That's kind of the elevator pitch. The reality is much more complex, and the reality is all about the fact that in the world of big data, you really cannot continue to live with rigid schema-on-write databases. You know, if you're not familiar with that concept, yeah, you know, the easiest example is like, you know, peanut butter and chocolate, right, and Reese's, right? The two have already been merged. Data and metadata, data and data model in your relational databases are infinitely tightly bound, right? You cannot separate the two, right? So from once you create your data model and you load your data into the data model, that's the only way you can look at that data, right? Based on the you know, referential integrity, primary foreign keys, the hierarchies that you build, right? These are your limitations. That's one of the reasons people go to Excel, right? In Hadoop, the biggest you know, kind of difference between Hadoop-based data and database data is that in Hadoop, peanut butter and chocolate, right, and data and metadata are separate, right? They can be put together on demand as required, but they are separate, right? So I can create a Hive, Apache Hive relational view into my Hadoop data one way, right, from a finance department, but from a marketing department, I can create a completely different view into exactly the same data set, right? So that's a very key concept that everybody needs to understand in terms of what are the right use cases for big data. So the conversation about you know, what big data is all about is infinitely more complex than multiple V's. Typically, you know, there are multiple threads here, but one of the typical conversation goes as follows. You know, is there a use case for you to build an application that requires not really a lot of volume, but requires more than 20 or 30% of your enterprise data, especially if you start looking at external data sources? And if you do indeed have a use case like that, especially with a use case where requirements do change very often, like in our front office customer-facing situations. If that's your use case, then you probably, in addition to analyzing the data, you also need to explore the data, right? Before you can analyze it in a big data environment, you need to look at what you have, right? In a big data environment, you have thousands and thousands of data sources that you really don't know what they are all about. You need to explore that data, and if you explore the data that hasn't been modeled, that data probably is going to be very complex, very sparse, right? If you put data from multiple data sources into one place, it's going to be very sparse, and very importantly, it's probably going to be not clean, right? You know, experience shows us that at most, as you can see by the numbers today, we can clean up 20 or 30% of our data. You can't clean up 100% of our data, right? So when you're dealing with amounts of data beyond 20 or 30%, you have to live with the fact that it's going to be dirty and messy to a certain extent. That means you probably have to have some kind of a schema on read, very flexible, very responsive environment. But how do you govern it? Right? That's a classical chicken and the egg syndrome. How do you govern something that you haven't modeled yet? Right? We know how to govern data that's stored in nice relational entities and attributes, right? That's how we secure it, and that's how we assign access, how we govern it. In the world of big data, you know, we haven't modeled it, right? It's schema on read. It, you know, the model becomes there on demand. It's not there always. So that kind of is a conversation that we need to take our clients through to understand the use cases for big data. So, just like my favorite character in Seinfeld, remember George when George's girlfriend started going out with Elaine, right? Hanging out with Elaine. George said, oh my God, the two worlds are colliding. You know, the two worlds cannot collide. George is very upset. Well, we do need to collide both worlds. We do need to merge the worlds of big data and agile BI into the systems of insight. So we at Forrester propose this hub and spoke architecture to converge the two. Front and center of that hub and spoke architecture is a big data lake, big data hub, where we propose that you indeed put close to 100% of all of your data. That's supposed to be a low effort, because this is not where you do your data integration or data governance, data transformation. You literally just put all of the data there. We call this your cold area, right? You know, Hadoop queries are not going to be as fast as your database queries. Hadoop is all about MapReduce, so it's much cheaper, very distributed environment, but it's not going to be as fast. So for all sorts of large, complex, but commoditized processes, let's say aggregation, sorting, filtering. Why occupy your inexpensive database with those tasks? Do that in Hadoop. Next step is what we call data discovery accelerators. Very important in the world of big data, in the world of agile environment where things change all the time. You're not going to have 2 or 3 nicely formatted, nicely documented data sources like your ERP and CRM environments. You're going to be dealing with thousands of data sources that change all the time. So you have to have tools and technologies that let you scan for those data sources, let you understand what's there. Is this a customer file? Within the customer file, is this a customer name? Are these customer names from my North America or South America environments? Then we get into kind of our standard interfaces, right? This is where ETL and data management and data integration take place. But we also want to have our ad hoc interfaces, right? That's the Apache Hive, right? That's the what Hortonworks and Cloudera are presenting here are pushing, right? You don't need to build your complex ETL processes that are very rigid. You can look at your Hadoop data on demand. Now we get into our traditional BI environment, right? This does not go away. So one of the biggest misconceptions about the big data world, especially based on Hadoop, is that we think that lots of complexities go away. They don't go away. They just shift in terms of priorities. They shift in terms of where they take place. So your data governance, data quality, master data management take place in your traditional physical or virtual environment. We call this your warm environment. Right now, it's queries run much faster than in Hadoop, but obviously that environment. Oops, my apologies. Obviously, that environment is much more expensive. And then the next one is your traditional BI kind of set of applications, BI platforms. This is where you want to do the real-time interactive, low latency, no latency, and zero latency interaction with data, probably calling for some kind of in-memory technology, probably the most expensive, but this is where you will have only smaller subsets of your data, right? So the cold area probably has as close to 100% of your data. Your warm area data warehouses will continue to have 20 or 30% of your data, and your in-memory hot areas will have data on demand. The data exploration technology has to be able to bypass all of these relational and rigid structures and be able to explore in a schema on read environment data directly in Hadoop. The reality today is that most of you will continue to have multiple BI tools. So knowing which BI tool to use for which use case and knowing which BI tool already has what kind of content is very important. So we recommend building some kind of a front-end portal where you should index all of your existing BI apps data and metadata, right, and then expose that index in some kind of a front-end portal and create an environment where people, before they go to Clip, before they go to Tableau, before they go to Alteryx, before they go to iDashboards or information builders where focus, they first type in a few keywords in that portal, and then, chances are that they may discover their content in application that they didn't think already exists. So this definitely creates an environment with lots, with a great reduction in overlaps between multiple BI tools. And in the world of systems of insight, big data, agile BI, integrated metadata, right? Something that we talked about, that we've been talking about for years and years. But finally, today it is absolutely very important to integrate all the metadata of all of these components, because as you can see in these 30, 40 components that are going to exist in your BI environment, unless you can do things like lineage analysis, impact analysis, you're really going to be falling behind. So that's kind of the hub and spoke environment that we talked about. So out of all of the components of the difference between BI and systems of insight, we covered the first three. Now let's just mention the other 4 or 5. These are kind of now over the edge, kind of a bleeding edge type of technology. So this is just to whet your appetite. Actionable BI, without some kind of actions, suggested actions, BI by itself comes to a dead end. right? Even if you see a great dashboard that's flashing red light at you, your inventory is low, doesn't really take you to the next step. What do you do about it? So actionable BI we equate with embedded BI. Right, embedded BI, embed BI into your operational applications. It'll carry context, so it'll be a lot more user-friendly. You could basically then analyze what's happening in your operational applications and take action. If you have much more complex environments with multiple ERP and multiple CRM applications, then key is to integrate BI and ERP and CRM metadata, and to integrate BI with your business process management, your business rules engine. We call that BI in the process, so that when you see that flashing light to order more inventory, you can actually right-click on it, and it'll take you right there into an ERP app to place a purchase order. Collective intelligence, very interesting trend, where some of the vendors, especially cloud vendors, are beginning to mine how other people, both your peers and your colleagues and your competitors, are using very similar applications, and based on that, they're providing proactive advice to you. Right? So if I'm looking to analyze, let's say, customer profitability, what are the typical metrics that other people in my organization, maybe in cloud-based, multi-tenant environment, use to analyze customer profitability? And when you pull up those metrics, what's the best dashboard to use? There's a single panel, multiple panel. For each panel is a pie chart, better visualization to analyze a particular metric, or is it scatter plot, right? So based on, not really any kind of neural networks, any kind of artificial intelligence, but basically based on what other colleagues, right, the other universe of people is using and leveraging that. Very interesting trend. Cognitive computing is one of the very interesting emerging trends, where basically big data, predictive analytics, text analytics, natural language processing is coming together to make some suggestions, right, to answer the questions in BI that couldn't be previously easily answered. And last but not least, kind of one of my favorite subjects is that we as BI professionals absolutely need to learn to eat our own dog food, right? We spend our careers trying to instill the discipline of running business by the numbers on our business colleagues, right? But do we run our own BI business by the numbers, right? Do we really know how many used versus unused reports do we have? Do we know how many clicks does it take you from a question to an answer? Do we know, why is it that our, Northeast department is using BI more than our, Southwest department, right? So looking at database logs, looking at BI platforms metadata, looking at Excel metadata, running surveys is something that we absolutely feel is a key capability, key functionality of your BI competency centers and your BI business, your BI centers of excellence. So run your BI business by the numbers. Eat your own dog food. And that's really the crux of my presentation. Basically, hopefully, if you follow some of the high-level advice here, you will have the cake and be able to eat it too. All right? These best practices in some of the companies that we work with indeed enable you and empower you to have that cake and eat it too, to have a scalable, a robust environment that's ready for mission-critical tasks, but at the same time it's agile, it's flexible, and it's ready for that age of the customer business agility that we talked about. And you want to make it a win-win situation, right? You want to create an environment where you and your business counterparts are not spending a lot of time with each other. You're spending most of your time, as we said earlier, winning, serving, and retaining your customers, which is really key to succeeding in this day and age. Thank you very much. Lots of ways to interact with me. I'm very active on blogs, social media, so I'll hang out for a few hours here. Stop and ask questions, or reach out to me in any of these venues. Thank you very much.